For many years, Africa has been called a rich continent. Rich in minerals. Rich in land. Rich in people. Beneath the soil of Africa are treasures: gold, diamonds, copper, cobalt, oil, and more. The world depends on Africa's natural wealth. But here is the sad truth: Africa's people have remained poor while others have grown rich from its resources. Let's take the story of Botswana as an example. Botswana is known around the world for its diamonds. Beautiful, strong, and valuable diamonds. For decades, these diamonds were dug out of the ground and sold as raw stones to big companies overseas. These companies would take the raw stones, cut them, polish them, and turn them into fine jewelry. Then they would sell them for millions of dollars. But guess what? Botswana got only a small part of that money. This has been the story across Africa. Our land is rich, but the people are poor. Why? Because our minerals leave in their raw form. No value is added here. No jobs are created. No factories are built. The wealth flies out like birds, never to return. In Ghana, the gold mines are deep, but many young people are jobless. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, cobalt powers electric cars around the world, but children still walk barefoot to school. In Zambia, copper is sent out in trucks and ships, but hospitals remain without medicine. And in Botswana, for many years, people asked, where is our share of the diamond money? The system was not fair. Foreign companies came with contracts that favored them. They brought machines and took the minerals. Then they exported them raw. And the countries of Africa? They were left with dust and promises. Some leaders tried to speak up, but they were ignored or pressured. They were told, it's too expensive to build factories. You don't have the skills. Just keep exporting raw materials, we'll help you. But help never truly came. Only a cycle of dependence and poverty. Many African governments believed that this was the only way to grow, by exporting raw materials and waiting for money to come in. But the people were not fools. They saw the truth. They saw the trucks leaving full and returning empty. They saw the gap between the wealth underground and the suffering above ground. And slowly, a new voice began to rise from the people. Farmers. Miners. Teachers. Youth. They started asking tough questions. Why are we not cutting our own diamonds? Why don't we build our own gold refineries? Why do we sell copper concentrate when we could make cables and electronics? Why must Africa always be the supplier, but never the owner? These questions grew louder and louder. It became clear, Africa did not need more charity. It needed fairness. It needed control. It needed value. Young people especially were tired. Tired of being told to wait. Tired of watching their land benefit others. They wanted jobs, not just lectures. They wanted dignity, not just donations. And they were ready for something different. And so, across the continent, a quiet storm was beginning. A new idea. A bold idea. An idea that said, no more raw exports. No more stolen wealth. Let Africa rise. This idea would soon turn into action. And from a small spark, it would grow into a fire. A fire of freedom, not the freedom of flags, but the freedom of economy. The freedom to own, build, and prosper. And in this quiet storm, the people of Botswana listened. They watched. And soon, they too would join the movement. In West Africa, in a country called Burkina Faso, something powerful began to happen. It didn't start with noise. It didn't start with war. It started with a young man who refused to be silent. His name is Ibrahim Traoré. At just 34 years old, he became the leader of Burkina Faso. Many people around the world were surprised. He is too young, they said. He cannot lead a country. But Traoré was not concerned with their opinions. He had one focus, his people. Burkina Faso is a country full of gold. Gold that shines in the earth. Gold that is meant to lift people out of poverty. But for years, that gold was taken out by foreign companies. It was exported in raw form. Just like in Botswana, Congo, Zambia, and so many other places. The country stayed poor. Villages had no clean water. Schools had no desks. Roads had holes and dust. Children walked miles just to learn. But there were gold mines just a few kilometers away. Traoré looked at this and said, "Enough." He stood before his people and spoke clearly. He didn't use complicated words. He didn't hide behind suits and titles. He said what the people already knew in their hearts. Our land is rich, but our people are poor. This is not by accident. It is by design. That must change, starting now. The people cheered. Traoré said the gold of Burkina Faso must benefit the people of Burkina Faso. It should be used to build roads, pay teachers, fund hospitals, and create jobs. No more raw gold leaving the country. If companies want gold, they must invest in the country. They must build refineries here. They must train young people. They must respect the people. This was not just a speech. It became action. Traoré's government passed new rules. They removed companies that refused to cooperate. They gave local businesses more chances. And they started building partnerships with countries that respected African dignity. At first, many outside powers were angry. Some said Traoré was being reckless. Others said he would fail. But the people of Burkina Faso believed in him. They said, "He speaks for us. He fights for us." And soon, other African countries began to pay attention. In Mali and Niger, new leaders also stood up. They saw how their own gold, uranium, and oil had made others rich while their people suffered. They joined Traoré in saying Africa must come first. Together, they began what many now call the New African Revolution. Not a revolution of guns. A revolution of the mind. A revolution of policy. A revolution of value. Young people across the continent looked up to Traoré. Not because he was perfect, but because he was brave. He spoke their language. He knew their pain. He shared their dream. He reminded them of Thomas Sankara, another young leader from Burkina Faso, who once said, "He who feeds you, controls you." Now, Traoré was feeding a new idea, self-reliance. In classrooms, youth discussed how to start their own factories. In the streets, people painted murals of Traoré next to other great African heroes. On radio stations, callers shouted, "We need a Traoré in every country." The message was spreading. Africa must process what it produces. Africa must keep its value at home. Africa must write its own story. And in southern Africa, the winds of change reached Botswana. President Duma Gideon Boko watched carefully. He saw how the people of Burkina Faso stood tall. He saw how Traoré was not bowing to pressure. He saw the joy in the faces of African youth finally feeling proud of their leaders. Botswana had always been known for good governance. But now it had a choice to make. Would it continue exporting raw diamonds and copper for small returns? Or would it follow the new path being laid by young voices across the continent? That answer would come soon. Because one by one, African nations were waking up. And the voice that began in Burkina Faso was no longer just Traoré's voice. It had become the voice of a continent ready to rise. As the winds of change swept across Africa, from the gold mines of Burkina Faso to the uranium fields of Niger, they reached deep into the heart of southern Africa, Botswana. For years, Botswana had been praised around the world for peace, stability, and good governance. The country had one of the fastest growing economies in Africa, thanks mostly to its diamond industry. But even with that praise, the truth remained: Botswana, like many African countries, had not been receiving the full value of its natural wealth. The diamonds were mined in Botswana, but they were exported raw to Europe, India, and elsewhere. Foreign companies did the cutting and polishing. They turned rough stones into sparkling gems, then sold them for millions. Botswana only got paid for the rough stones, not the polished beauty, not the finished value. The people knew this. The youth knew this. And now, with the example of Traoré and the growing movement in West Africa, Botswana could no longer look away. A new president had taken office, Duma Gideon Boko. A man known for speaking plainly and standing for justice. He listened to the cries of the people. He watched Traoré's speeches and actions. He heard the new voice of Africa rising. And then, he made a decision. One morning, standing before a crowd of journalists, workers, and local business leaders, President Boko made an announcement that would change the future of Botswana forever. From this day forward, he said, no minerals will leave Botswana unprocessed. No diamond will leave this country raw. All will be cut and polished here. No copper concentrate will be exported without value added. There was silence for a moment. Then the crowd burst into applause. The people could feel it, a shift, a new beginning. President Boko continued. For too long, we have been the suppliers. For too long, we have been told to be patient. But we are done waiting. We will build. We will train. We will grow our own economy. Not for others, but for us, for our children, for Botswana. Immediately, the government began taking action. Old contracts with foreign companies were reviewed. New agreements were signed, with strict rules. If you want our diamonds, you must invest in Botswana. You must create jobs here. You must share knowledge and technology. The country began building cutting and polishing centers. Young Botswana were trained in new skills, stone cutting, metal refining, machine operation. Schools added courses on gem processing and industrial work. Entrepreneurs were encouraged to open *** locally owned. The sun was rising on a new Africa. From the deserts of Niger to the green hills of Ghana, and from the gold mines of Burkina Faso to the diamond plains of Botswana, something was changing. Something powerful. Something long overdue. The old ways were breaking down. The days when Africa was only seen as a supplier of raw materials were coming to an end. The continent had had enough of being rich in resources but poor in returns. Now, a new Africa was being born, one that believed in keeping value on its own soil, creating jobs for its own people, and controlling its own future. And it had leaders to thank for that. Leaders who were not perfect, but who were bold. Leaders who listened to the people. Leaders like Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso and Duma Gideon Boko of Botswana. They were very different men from very different regions, but they were standing for the same truth. Africa must no longer be robbed. Africa must no longer wait. Africa must rise now, and rise together. Across the continent, countries began making changes. Mali and Niger had already passed laws banning the export of raw minerals. They were working together to create joint refineries for gold and uranium. Ghana had pushed foreign companies out of its gold sector, demanding fair terms and local processing. And now Botswana, one of Africa's most respected nations, had stepped forward. Its bold move to stop exporting raw diamonds and copper sent a clear message to the world. If you want Africa's resources, you must come with respect. You must come with partnership. Not with power, but with fairness. This new wave of action was being called the Value Revolution. But it was more than just economics. It was about freedom. The kind of freedom that goes beyond independence from colonial rule, the freedom to own your wealth, to shape your future, and to feed your people from the fruits of their land. And for the first time in a long time, the people believed it was possible. Young Africans began to dream differently. In the past, many dreamed of leaving the continent. Of going to Europe or America to find a better life. But now, a new generation was dreaming of building factories, starting companies, and working with pride in their own countries. Schools began teaching skills of the future: mineral processing, metalwork, jewelry design, manufacturing. Universities started research programs focused on local industrial growth. Governments created youth programs to help new entrepreneurs enter the mining and value addition industries. They gave small loans and training to young people with business ideas. Women were also rising, taking leadership roles in these new industries, bringing balance, strength, and vision. The movement wasn't without challenges. Some foreign companies tried to push back. They complained. They threatened to leave. They even tried to influence policies through pressure. But the new leaders stood firm. If you leave, others will come. But we will no longer be exploited, said President Boko in one powerful speech. Our land is our inheritance. Our resources are not charity. We are open for business, but on African terms. And many honest companies agreed. They saw the value of investing in Africa the right way. They began opening training centers, building local processing plants, and employing more Africans. At the same time, African countries began working together more than ever before. Regional trade groups like ECOWAS and SADC started planning joint factories and cross-border energy projects. Countries began sharing skills, not just competing. The spirit of Pan-Africanism, once just a dream of past heroes like Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, and Thomas Sankara, was now taking real form in factories, in policies, in people's hearts. And the people? They were watching all this with hope. In Burkina Faso, a farmer who once barely made a living now sent his children to school with pride. In Botswana, a young woman trained in diamond polishing opened her own business with 3 employees. In Mali, youth who once dug gold with their bare hands now worked in clean, safe processing plants. The difference was visible. The message was clear. This was no longer the Africa of begging bowls. This was the Africa of building blocks. This was an Africa not waiting for the world to change, but changing itself, through unity, through wisdom, and through the powerful belief that the continent's future should be written by African hands. As President Traoré said in a message that was shared across the continent, Africa is not a child to be fed. Africa is a mother who has fed the world. Now she must feed her own. And President Boko echoed him days later. Let our children read in history books, there was a time Africa gave away its treasure, but then we woke up. And we never looked back.